In the hush of the Halloween night, underneath the pale moonlight, shadows dance and whispers rise, as strange lights flicker in the skies. Silver discs on silent wings carry secrets, strange and grim things. The air is thick with a curious thrill, as the world holds its breath, waiting still. Ghostly figures in glowing green haunt the fields where the shadows lean. With the eyes like stars and haunting glow, they beckon forth from the depths below. Beware the paths where the shadows creep, for secrets buried they shall keep. On this night where the veil is thin, will the unknown come waltzing in. So gather round, both brave and bold, as tales of the cosmos begin to unfold. For in the darkness the truth may loom, a Halloween night filled with alien gloom. This is Universal Disclosure Meeting the Moment, Halloween edition.
Universal Disclosure Podcast once again proudly welcomes Reverend David William Parry.
I would probably say, to shock everybody, Halloween is a Catholic festival. The earth, the living earth, Gaia, the earth angel. Some people even believed that the consciousness of a human being went into the earth at death as part of the team that went to exorcise people. So to get a grip on it all, rather like this show, what is this phenomenon? What are we dealing with? Let's get all these different opinions and pull resources to see what we're dealing with here. I've always been interested in anomalous phenomena, which is the best way of describing all of this, I think. So I gave regular talks to some of these occult societies. Faces began to appear around his head. These evil little orange, about this size, right, little heads appearing and dissipating. And I suddenly realized this guy was bringing negative energies into my apartment, to which I said, get out, which is why exorcisms do need to take place from time to time, which is why prayer circles are vital in this process. Now, let's take this from a different angle. Let's look at the Jinn, the Arabic designation of a certain type of spiritual species. Are they linked with UFOs? Very, very clearly. Very, 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 very clearly in those cultures. The fact intelligences from elsewhere and here, are interpenetrating with us historically, culturally, scientifically, artistically. That's the unexplored one. Is there occult technology? Yes, and curiously, it gets more complex the further you go back, which shows we've lost access to some.
The following program is presented for general information, education and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be advice of any kind. The content, views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals involved. The use of information on this program is at the user's own discretion.
Welcome one and all, wherever and whenever you may be. This is Universal Disclosure Meeting the Moment, Halloween edition. My name is Mike, an active UFO field investigator in Southern California, with my friend and co-host,
Reverend Stu in Melbourne, Australia.
Reverend Stu, happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you so much. As you know well, Halloween, the 31st of October, is my birthday, and I'm very grateful that we're doing this Halloween episode. Thank you, Mike.
You are very welcome. I even carved you a pumpkin.
Wow, that's next level. Hey, am I seeing some kind of UFO on that pumpkin?
That you are. Unfortunately, it's not coming through perhaps on the video. So I've already got a close up. We're gonna put that up there because I spent about an hour and a half carving this sucker.
That's so good. Thank you so much. How wonderful.
Oh, my pleasure. And I think our guest today is going to enjoy that as well.
Oh, most certainly. Can't wait to talk to Reverend David William Parry again. He's a wealth of information on these kind of occult topics that are largely associated with Halloween.
Absolutely. And I feel in great company at midnight here and filming this with two reverends. I feel like I've got the power of all the spiritual power I need here.
Thank you. Well, I should mention in the introduction here that the word occult means to shut off from view or exposure, cover or eclipse. So it's not necessarily anything nefarious. It just means it's been obscured. And that's one of the questions I want to ask Reverend David today about.
Yeah, I mean, I remember growing up in the Catholic Church, and we were pretty much told that it's demonic and stay away from it. You don't even want to go there.
Yeah, well, it's still very informing. And as you know, I'm very interested in the Dr. Jacques Vallée perspective on UAPs and aliens, etc. And it definitely borders into this topic. So that's why I'm very interested to have this conversation with Reverend David today.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think it's going to be amazing. Would you do the official honors of introducing, please?
Thank you, Mike. Universal Disclosure Podcast once again proudly welcomes Reverend David William Parry.
So, Reverend David, welcome back. Thank you so much for being with us again. We've been looking forward to this, planning it for a little bit now. And I was kind of curious. We're doing our Halloween special to talk about the potential connection between the occult and UFOs. So I guess we'll soon find out if there is one. But just to get kind of started out here, what's your opinion on Halloween?
Start with the easy ones. Good day and felicitations to you both. It's wonderful to be back on the show, my favorite show. I'm asked on lots of UFO and paranormal shows. Mostly nowadays, I do it with deep respect to everybody as a duty, because I'm sort of known as a mouth that gets invited onto these things. It's a bit of fun. I love you two individually as my friends. You know that. I love this show and what it's trying to do. I think it's quite unique in what it's trying to do. What is going on, and let's not have any preconceived opinions. Let's look at what the evidence is and ask and inquire. Wow, how many shows are actually really doing that? And of course, today is a depth series of topics. I mean, it's quite hard to know where to start with all of that. Let's start with Halloween, because Mike raised it. There are lots of opinions in Europe because, we destroyed the pagan traditions allegedly, and we also didn't allegedly. So the situation is complex from the beginning. Certainly, the Roman Church didn't like just at various stages of its early history, didn't like just storming into a place and indoctrinating everybody. That did happen later on. But in the early stages, there was a lot of collegiality between certain groups of pagan priests and the Roman priests. And that's sociological, that's ethnic. There aren't many Romans in the area. You can't throw your weight around. But also there was a big debate we touched on it a minute ago between, what are we all talking about? What are these beliefs, and is there any common ground? And sometimes common ground was discovered. So certainly neo-pagans, of which I'm privileged to know many, would say that we're looking at, in this part of the world, ancient pagan beliefs, be they Celtic, be they Iberian. I'm thinking of local ones to me, Celtic from down the road, Wales and pre-English England. Scottish, with the different tribes and the different ways these communities interacted with the continuum. There's a humanist myth, and I use it in pejorative sense going around at the minute, that somebody makes up their religious position and they just adopt it regardless. A community makes a religious connection. It explores the religious impulse. That's William James, isn't it? The religious impulse as a group, and it starts naming things as a group. So, it's a community response to the environment, the complexities of the environment, and higher realms. I would probably say, to shock everybody, Halloween is a Catholic festival. There's something called All-Hallow-Tide, which people tend to forget nowadays because they don't know the tradition themselves. that actually begins on October the 31st, which is a night of vigil. You know, this is a time of year in our part of the world where ancestors are remembered and honored. Even the buggers are honored. They're now with the dead. They are honored. They had lives. They were part of us. They're honored. Even if it was difficult, they are honored. So the vigil is 31st, candles are lit, prayers are said, which goes into the 1st of November, All Saints' Day. You know, the glorious dead. Who is it that achieved higher consciousness? Maybe in your family and you don't know it. You know, are there saints in your family and you've never bothered to inquire? So we remember the glorious dead, as it's called, those who've achieved that higher stage in faith, that higher stage in enlightenment, in consciousness. And then it goes on November the 2nd to All Souls Day, where we remember everybody in our prayers. You know, the annoying local biddy who was spying on everybody. You know, so everybody in our tradition gets a look in and gets remembered. Certainly the Celts, to use them as a case in point, would have remembered the dead, their own ancestors, at this time of year, probably in much more agricultural ways than we do nowadays, for obvious reasons. I mean, we're living in an agricultural society, but not in an agricultural society. So, you know, would big city slickers like Mike Riso, you know, would he really, you know, be able to go into a swoon and a trance next to a tractor? You know, I mean, and if he did, what would it mean? I mean, you know, so, you know, things move on and they change and they shift, but certainly in the old days, there was a deep resonance for the dead as they related to the earth, the living earth, Gaia, the earth angel. Some people even believed that the consciousness of a human being went into the earth at death. Therefore, our ancestors, their thoughts, their consciousness were actually in the earth physically in some weird way, and that needed respecting and honoring, which is why the earth was literally our mother and our father, but usually our mother. So it was a very important time, which they would have done, I think, in quite a low, they would have celebrated. It was a celebration, I remember it's in a quite a low-key way. It wouldn't have been like a sort of Mexican Day of the Dead, although of course that's the same festival, you know, where you get your sombrero out and the mariachis turn up and everybody's dancing and getting drunk. My God, those Mexican boys don't miss a trick, do they? That sounds huge fun. So, or is it Madagascar? I can never remember, where they start digging people up and dancing around with them. That's a bit too far. I'm not sure I could do that one. Wow. So, or is it Mozambique? I always get those things muddled. But, you know, certainly it's a time of remembrance, of respect and celebration, which in its modern form, I think must arise as a Catholic festival early on. So All Hallowtide, which is 3 days, preparation, prayers of remembrance and general remembrance for, you know, people who we wouldn't be here without, whether they were stinkers or not. They're part of our chain, they're part of our life. And I think Orthodox Christianity is actually better than even us weird Catholics in this, because they're very adamant that, you know, you don't know what the relationship of annoying Uncle Boris is to God. I'm sorry, you just don't. Maybe God loves him. You know, maybe there's a direct relationship there. Leave Uncle Boris alone. That sort of thinking might need to come back. I notice, you know, in the old ways, no matter how abhorrent our family situations were, and let's face it, they can be abhorrent, you know, they're still human beings and we don't know what they're dealing with, and their family and their community, and it's unwise just to write people off, which is not only for our own humanity, but the good of the community. You know, if the standards of communal life sink below a certain point, there's chaos. And is that really what we want? And that seems to be what the world's going into at the minute. But is it how we want to live? You know, I can't go to the theatre if there's armed fighting going down every street on the way to the theatre. You know, there's a new game in certain modern cities where you have an app to avoid the human excrement on the streets. You know, I mean, what sort of world are we all moving into? And is that what we want? And is it because the one thing we can't do is respect each other? And why can't we? Why can't we? We may be talking to saints. They may be speaking Spanish. They may be speaking Russian, but they may be saints. We don't know. Have we asked? Have we inquired? There was something. Oh, this will get me in trouble. I love Emma Goldman. Everybody thinks I've taken sides in the various wars and conflicts. I haven't. I love Emma Goldman, old anarchist girl, who said very clearly, until we understand each other, we can't forgive each other. Now, what about that from the horse's mouth? What a great piece of advice, which of course fits in very nicely with the current topic. Do we really understand who we're criticizing, who we're attacking in our own families, let alone the wider community? And if we don't, who are we? Who gave you the right to look down your nose at Conchita next door? Who gave you the right to criticize Madame Francoise? Why? Who are you? We need a bit of humility. We need a bit of remembrance. We need a bit of faith. And we need these festivals to come back, I think, with a bit more clarity and force, because it gives you a nice sense of perspective. You are one link in a long chain, and it goes back to the beginning of time. There'll be a staring at mystery in your own family. Nobody here would be alive without those chains of being going back to the origin, no matter what that was. And you are the current link in that chain. And it doesn't mean suddenly do all the things you're meant to do. You're under control. It means you are that at the moment. Where are you going with it all? Where are you taking these endless treasures? That for me would be Halloween, the festival, the celebration as it's celebrated in Catholicism. And that would be why I think that maybe the present day origins of the festival's the wrong word. I know evangelicals like saying it's a festival because they're trying to score points again and show we're all in the wrong, but you're in the wrong. There we are. The documents are heavily against you. And I don't hate evangelicals, but get a grip, for God's sake. I think it's very clearly a Catholic festival that people forgot was Catholic as history moved on. Remember that these isles haven't been Catholic in a very long time now. And that's not to say Catholics were right and Episcopalians were wrong. It's not to say anything like that. It's not to talk about Henry VIII and why the Reformation started and what the arguments of theology were, some of which were very, very good, by the way, about what was going wrong. It's to do with history and the changing shifts in the sands and winds that make us what we are, propel us forward. So for me, increasingly, or Hallowtide, the Halloween, that wonderful 31st when we carve pumpkins and tell each other scary stories, is actually part of a much wider process of sanctification, leading to really clear understandings that we are links in a chain and our family aren't monsters. We might think they are at times, and sometimes they are. But, they're not uniquely monsters. They're not monsters every morning, noon and night. And we're somehow linked with our friends and our family. Therefore, it leads to holiness and sanctity and remembering the bigger picture. Does that... shut up, David, for God's sake. Does that answer you, Mike?
Wow, yeah, that does. Thank you very, very much.
I'm showing my pumpkin again.
Awesome. So in the spirit of Halloween, I have a question, and just to toss out there. Have you ever personally participated in an exorcism?
Right, I've got to reorient myself now. I have not personally either performed or been directly involved in an exorcism, although I have been involved in what Catholics, I think Orthodox people call it something different. I have been involved in what they call prayer circles to support somebody in that type of psychological and spiritual trouble at the request of the priest who is performing that act. I have been invited to attend some of these things. Normally, I'm sorry to drag this down to earth, normally you're looking at a clash of diaries where somebody can only do it at a particular time with the blessing of the local bishop. And I'm sorry, God, that week is just impossible. So, you've got never forget the practicalities in all of this. As I was saying to you both off air, in Catholicism, I think it's the same in Episcopalianism, in Anglicanism. I hear it's 10 times worse in Orthodoxy. Red tape is red tape. Sorry, that's the world we live in now. Firstly, you've got to be recognized as the sort of person with the gift, the charism, the gift of that type of healing. You know, St. Paul, I think it's in Corinthians, starts listing all of the different gifts, spiritual gifts people have. Some preach, some teach, some heal. So this would be included under the auspices of a healing ministry. And a healing ministry takes very many forms. So then I believe it's tested somehow. I've never inquired how. So you're recognized as a person with that gift and then given training. I don't know what the training would be, but it's there, and you have to do that in the Catholic Church. As I say, I hear it's 10 times worse in Orthodoxy. And then, and only then, can you and the normally family approach the area bishop, the regional bishop, to seek permission for this rite, which is very powerful, to be performed at a particular place at a particular time. And no, I mean, normally a row starts at that point about whether it's a case needing exorcism or not. I mean, they get experts in. You know, I know certain robust born again denominations love rushing in and exercising everybody at the drop of a hat. Yeah, well, yeah, good on you, good on you. I mean, I think the whole process deserves a great deal more gravitas than that, personally. And certainly you can't pretend that human psychology hasn't arisen. You know, the science of psychology, the sciences of psychotherapy and so on. You can't pretend they're not there, and you can't pretend they're not worthy and healing and important and good. So to ignore that type of feedback in these cases, I personally think is a disaster. What was it? M. Scott Peck, People of the Lie. What a remarkable book that is. He used to invite atheists as part of the team that went to exorcise people. So to get a grip on it all, rather like this show, you know, what is this phenomenon? What are we dealing with? Let's get all these different opinions and pull resources to see what we're dealing with here. That, for me, sounded like the real deal. You know, not people running around with crosses waving, you know, left, right, and centre. Bit of fun, maybe. Not, I think, dealing maybe with a problem that needs dealing with. So if all of that takes place, then, as I say, normally it's a team headed by an exorcist that will go in and perform the rite, as I understand it. Very serious in Catholicism, very elaborate, powerful stuff, powerful stuff. For my own position, and for once I'm in the consensus, right, I've got my LGBTQ plus clergy colour on. So it is important when I say that sometimes I am in the consensus. 9 times out of 10, what you're talking about is spiritual oppression more than exorcism. I mean, I know 1 or 2 theologians who are quite well respected, but had better remain nameless because you need permission to be able to quote people like this, who would say actually possessions never occur. Because you're a child of God, and if they occur, they're momentary. You know, the system ejects. Because you're a child of God, you know, that's not really possible. However, very serious spiritual oppression, as it's called in the game, can certainly happen, you know, ranging all the way from somebody every now and again, every 5 years, having a spot of bad luck and thinking, oh, that's odd, you know, that's nothing to do with me, doesn't come from my life circumstances, what's going on there, all the way down to somebody not being able to sleep, you know, doors opening and closing, things moving around, down to very dark, deep and horrible places, but it's still oppression. And then you have to get, as far as I understand the mechanism, into, right, how did this weakness of the spirit, this weakness of the psyche occur in the first place? How are you letting these energies in? You're a child of God. You must be complicit. I don't mean that in a judgmental sense. In you know, or maybe you've damaged yourself in some way. Somehow these energies are being able to get in and twist you around a bit. How did that happen? Let's try and discern how that happened in the first place, and then what needs to be done. And of course, so you're back in the land of psychotherapy, as far as I can see. That process might take years to get to the point whereby everybody in the team agrees and the exorcist agrees, we've got it now. So in the old language, we can name the demon. You know, it doesn't mean turning up and going through a checklist of surnames. You know, you name the demon by knowing what the demon is and what it's doing. That's how you name things. Only our good Lord could just turn up and say, what is your name? And it would always answer immediately. There was no choice. And you're expelled. No choice. Because of who he was and what he was doing. The rest of us can have the gift, but we certainly, to my understanding, can't work on that Christ-like level. If it can be done, wonderful. Great. But, you know, with the people I've met who were actually serious scholars and serious healers, I mean, none of them would have said that's really the way it works nowadays under this type of dispensation. And you need these lengthy processes before the rite takes place. And when the rite takes place, you know, there we are, done and dusted, but it mustn't cause any other psychological harm or spiritual harm. You know, most people find these elaborate rituals incredibly potent, you know, in their own right. And then the guilt thing, some people have noticed the guilt thing creeps in. You know, how can I have caused so much trouble for so many people? And then you're open to letting these things back in again. You know, so it's a very, very lengthy and complex process. As I say, I've had the privilege of being involved as part of a prayer team, a prayer circle, but not actually myself. Can I tell you a strange psychic story, you two? Are these things real? Now, remember, part of my background is in psychology, psychotherapy, because it absolutely fascinates me. The biggest error the church ever made, the Catholic Church, I don't like criticizing other churches. I've got enough criticizing to do with our lot, let alone anybody else. The biggest mistake we made was watering down confession, which was this whole elaborate process. Any psychotherapist will instantly recognize what that is, that Jungian process, whereby you're discerning things you feel are at odds inside you, and you discuss it with the therapist, and you discuss the way to bring yourself back to balance. Any therapist will recognize what's going on there. And that's a lengthy process, and psychotherapy was occurring. You know, it wasn't just about you turning up once a month to meet old Father Murphy, you know, 3 Hail Marys, and you can buy me a pint of Guinness on the way out. There was a lot more to it than that. For various reasons, that got pushed to the side. I think it was during the time of the modernizers, and that's not to attack them, we needed them. Let's get to the basis of it, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, both of which I approve of. Massive steps forward in human evolution and culture. But let's take it from there, the Enlightenment. Then all these philosophes turn up in France saying, look, we're absolutely sick of wars of religion. Let's look at this in a different way. Let's talk about nature as what we are, you know, that's our basis for understanding. Does all that other stuff exist? I don't know, maybe. I don't want to talk about it. Let's talk about nature. Then we can get a good Barney going and try and make more peace in the world. I mean, that's what they were all saying. They weren't atheists, you know, they were deists. I notice atheists are playing a very clever game nowadays. Well, they didn't mention God or go to church, did they? Well, actually, they did. You know, they believed in something. They just didn't want that type of vocabulary causing more trouble than it was curing. That was the point. And some of the things they say are mind-blowingly beautiful and holy. I mean, that needs revisiting. So, you know, basically the modernizers in the church, who, with due respect, may not have understood these arguments at great depth. So, that's got to go, that's medieval nonsense, without maybe truly understanding what the arguments were or what the ceremonies were about. So we've managed to throw our version, our budding version of psychotherapy out the window, and it's hopefully creeping back now, because the two things are peas in a pod. It needs to be back. Particularly when, dun dun dun, Halloween stuff, particularly when you are dealing with human psyches that don't always obey the laws of nature as we understand them now. I've always been interested in anomalous phenomena, which is the best way of describing all of this, I think. For two reasons. I'm on an intellectual level, I'm trying to find ways around modernism. I know this is where Mike has a heart attack because Americans worship modernism. So you'll have to forgive me, but it's wrong. You know, I love the idea of all these star cities and moving in with Elon Musk and Optimus, and all great stuff. But the point is, the philosophy, the philosophical underpinning of modernism makes far too many assumptions about what the human condition is and what it can't do. How do you know? No. Therefore, I'm on the side of the postmodernists, who basically were the first group of modern thinkers to turn up and say, well, hang on, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with this analysis. We can't quite put our finger on it, but there's something wrong. So I'm with them for reasons like this. There was a time when I moved in occult circles. There's a pregnant pause there. In London, moving to London as a young scallywag, getting involved in the artistic community. I mean, London in those days was a hothouse of intrigue and ideas and art and self-expression and experimentation. It was wonderful in those days. So I gave regular talks to some of these occult societies. Talking Sticks, remember you well. Oh God, what were the others? I'm trying to remember. So long ago, I can't remember. I gave a couple of talks at the Atlantis bookshop, this sort of hub of esotericists, and met some curious people. One of whom, I'll just give one story, then maybe we can take it from there. One of whom was excuse me, a guy who at first didn't even realize he was a medium. Remember, just because I say something is psychological, it doesn't mean it's unreal. For me, that type of question wouldn't make sense. That type of assertion wouldn't make sense. If something psychological isn't in front of you, nothing is in front of you. We are psychophysical beings. Therefore, I don't know what someone would mean if they think it's unreal or less real. What do you mean by that? Anyway, let's talk about this guy. He thought he was doing what the Victorian mediums would do, what has happened to me when I did time to time. You know, you get psychogeography. You go into a place, you go into a street, you go into a building. What are you picking up here? Now, for me, those are largely acts of the imagination. Don't undervalue the imagination. You know, they're acts of creativity. Do you get the atmosphere, the feeling of a place? Of course you do. You must be a complete barbarian not to do that. So this guy started in that way, and I confess to doing it myself and learning a lot about depth history that way. But it went further. He started realizing he was a medium. He then started realizing he was a physical medium. In mediumistic circles, in spiritualistic circles, they divide the gift that they're discussing into different types and different manifestations. Therefore, a physical medium is the type that can move objects, you know, telekinesis, that sort of stuff. He came to one of my apartments after I'd known him a couple of years in London and said, look at this. And I didn't know, right, so someone comes through your front door one weekend morning, Saturday, can't remember which one, maybe not Saturday, and says, look at this. Yeah, right, getting the kettle on, you know, what do you want me to do? Faces began to appear around his head, right? The size of little oranges. Therefore, I have seen what the Victorians used to talk about. They would, materialize is the wrong word. They would try to take form. It was like looking at a photographic negative. There was no color, there was a grayness. They would try to take form around the lower part of the head. And then they'd each, about three of them, I think, they'd get an evil expression on their face and then dissipate. And I actually couldn't believe what I was looking at. And I said, can you see what is happening to you? And he said something very curious. No, I can't, I'm quoting, no, I can't see, but I can feel. And this happened repeatedly. These evil little orange, about this size, right, little heads appearing and dissipating. And I suddenly realized this guy was bringing negative energies into my apartment, to which I said, get out. You know, who do you think you are? You know, you're bringing all this nastiness into my home. You are not invited here anymore. You know, can you leave? Do not come here. Do not come here doing those things. He left without an argument, thank God. And I've never got over that particular experience. That is ectoplasm in one of its forms. That is ectoplasm being manipulated semi-consciously by the medium and manifesting and dissipating because the medium didn't know what he was doing, or, thank heavens, knowing how to hold on to it. I've also seen ectoplasm at a much higher form. I was invited to take part in what was booked as a depth meditation. It didn't turn into that, so I left. No, not because I was so utterly disapproving, because there are only so many bottles of wine you can drink amongst these bloody hippies, you know, who are talking to them. Right, is it now 3 a.m.? Are we going to do anything, or is it another bottle of wine being broken out? So, you know, they decided to all stand and do something. One of them, again, was a gifted medium, and electrical streaks, amber coloured, began to race along the ceiling and then drop. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, that is what the Victorians meant by ectoplasm. This electrical like astral energy that's being summoned or released by a medium who may or may not know what they're doing. Therefore, for me, the psyche cannot be limited by the materialistic and rationalistic paradigms of modernism, where in advance you've already decided certain things can't happen. For me, that is a betrayal not only of the scientific enterprise, it's a betrayal of the human condition. Because you're saying, you know, where these little animals bounded in to frames of reference, which are actually quite narrow, which I've never believed. And you're saying, along with the postmodernists, hang on, there's much more going on here. And you end up in psychotherapy territory, and then a few steps beyond that, which is why exorcisms do need to take place from time to time, which is why prayer circles are vital in this process, and which is also why M. Scott Peck is completely on the button when he gets teams of people involved that all look at the phenomena from a different angle, so he can shed light on what it is and bring healing to that person and that family group. I hope. What did you think of my revelations? Were they horrific?
We're amazing.
Fantastic.
I'll come up with some more then.
And numerous UAP sightings are described as plasma orbs, and plasma is referred to as the fourth state of matter and could well be described as smokeless fire. The Jinn, from which we derive our English word genie and genius, are also described as plasma beings. Do you feel like there could be a connection there?
That was a good link, Stuart. That was a good link. Oh, Jinn. I've spent many a New Year's Eve with Jinn.
I see.
So, right. So what is the Bible? Exhaust all the human sciences, express every single human art, populate every planet in the galaxy, and we're only just beginning to understand the Bible, right? The Quran, we're only just beginning. These aren't little tiny volumes that you flip over in a bad mood to accuse somebody else of witchcraft if they're annoying you. You know, there's more to it than all of this. Life is bigger. Are they the fourth state of matter? I really wonder what that means. I like the plasma thing. That's physics getting on a much more sophisticated level, I suspect. Plasma is meant to be alive. I've heard somebody say that recently. What that means, I don't know, but it's an interesting hypothesis. Why can't it become entified? Certainly, yeah. I mean, right. Let's take this from a different angle. Let's look at the jinn, the Arabic designation of a certain type of spiritual species. Um, are they linked with UFOs? Very, very clearly. Very, 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 very clearly in those cultures. Those cultures are very good at what we've forgotten to do, possibly because of modernism. And I'm not even saying that didn't have its place in the evolution of human beings. It clearly did. But it's now, it's now like wearing a straitjacket. It's not that, it's like clothes, you grow out of them. There's no point dressing in the clothes you had as a schoolboy if you're 47. They don't fit you. And it's the same with modernism. Was it great in its day? Yes, it did so much good, but we've outgrown it now. We need other ways of understanding the world and newer and better values and ways of treating each other and working with each other. It's all moved on. Certainly Islamic cultures, I mean, as you both know, I've worked with Islamic cultures for 30 years and over and had nothing but the richest of experiences. They're intelligent, they're bright, they're modern. They're not all wearing turbans and throwing handfuls of sand at each other. I wish those images would come back. Sinbad the Sailor, do you remember all of that? When the West used to think of these cultures as romantic and exotic and magical. I wish all that would come back. They are those things, are the other things as well, but they are those things. The jinn are a daily reality in Islamic cultures. And I've known some very hard-nosed Islamic businessmen that say not only have they encountered them, they've met them in human form. Oh, now it starts getting interesting. And the jinn always give themselves away. It's like the angels. The angels have got their number, so they can't get away with anything. The angels have got their number. So they've given certain barriers that the jinn can't get across. So they have to give themselves away, whether they like it or not. Don't forget, the jinn are not necessarily evil. They can be good jinn. And certain Islamic scholars, certain clerics, you see, you'd have to know the theology. Because like us, they've got all these different schools and they've got long traditions. And then you think, right, I get lost halfway through this argument because I know he's referring to somebody who's referring to somebody who's quoting somebody else. You get very, very lost very easily. They would say, there are at least two different types of jinn, evil and good, obviously. The evil ones aren't necessarily evil to human beings. Maybe they're evil to the environment. Maybe they're evil to the continuum as they find it, because they find it limiting to them, or they can't move, or they can't do this, or they can't do that. So they're clawing at things which actually we need or do us good. Therefore, they're against us, but indirectly. Whereas the good jinns, according to one theologist I talked to, everyone at the end of time will have one of these jinn as a servant. Oh God, can we get there more quickly? I mean, one of these powerful beings going around and doing the hoovering, sod Optimus. Optimus costs an arm and a leg. So no, right, yeah, can you do the washing up now, please? Wouldn't that be great? Get out there and do it. Yeah, I mean, they appear in all sorts of outrageous forms. They can't hold on, rather like spirits, and they're not spirits in that classic sense. They can't hold on. Negative energies can't hold on. They can oppress, and sometimes for what we would think is a long time, but they can't hold on. We're children of God. But what the jinn want to do is go about their own business, and normally it's us annoying them as opposed to the other way around. They haunt places. They can take malevolent forms. They can take a dislike to individuals. They can take a dislike to cities, to mosques, to churches, to temples, to synagogues. If they get uppity, they let you know about it. Certainly, they are meant to be born of fire. Human beings were born of the good earth that the Almighty molded at the beginning of time, or maybe the blood that the Almighty shifted into a human being. I mean, sculpted and artificed, but the jinn don't have that glorious story behind their name. They're built of fire, you know, embers thrown across the stars, and they were gathered up by almighty powers and made into the class of the Jinn. They're not really, so they're plasma, right? Very, very clearly, in modern terms, they're plasma. Certainly, the Islamic world would see absolutely nothing unusual in discussions of Jinn. I'm thinking of holding a conference on the Jinn at one point. Because I don't think we're doing that in the West at the minute. What a fascinating study. They link very, very clearly with some of the bright lights people see in the sky, bright lights floating around and descending to the earth, and then taking bizarre and bewildering shapes and asking people strange and illogical things, which, if the person wasn't so frightened, would realize was strange and illogical. And that's one of the reasons it's a giveaway. It's not an extraterrestrial intelligence of any biological kind descending to the earth on some sort of survey. I mean, you two know I don't believe in that. I gave reasons why on the last show. So, you know, you're not looking at some type of alien Oppenheimer, you know, going around measuring things and, you know, would you mind speaking into this microphone, please, because we need a voice to. So you're not looking at that. You're looking at something genuinely odd in every way, because they can't interact with us in the way that they would possibly like to, because that's forbidden. That's not been allowed. And certainly some of these orbs that you see in the Holy Land, excuse me, hovering around places of worship, ask a Muslim and they'll be very clear they're Jinn. You know, there won't be a second word about it. They're Jinn. And we've forgotten in the West to talk about intelligences. I mean, the angels originally were known as intelligences. Remember, angeloi, angel only means messenger. So what is bringing you the message? An intelligence, a celestial intelligence. You know, the old sorcerers, the old witches, white witches, would have said we live in a world that's impregnated and surrounded by these intelligences, some of which are very narrow and small, and maybe no less than us. Some of which are vast and titanic, and were there at the beginning. And, you know, what sort of reaction can we give to a being like that, apart from awe and respect? So, and some of them, of course, still guide this world, still come into this world. You've got to think of the old Gnostic idea, the Manichaean idea, but it's more than Manichaeanism. You know, no matter what you think the origin of evil is, and there's a question in itself, which may not have the answers people suspect it does. You know, you've got two worlds. We're in no man's land in the middle. You've got the world of light and you've got the world of darkness. And these are universes and universes in their own right. And everything is going on in those universes that make life and activity in those universes. And every now and again, maybe for its own reason, an entity, a being, an intelligence will leave one of those worlds and go through our world, our continuum, and maybe it will have business here, maybe it won't. Maybe it's just passing by and everyone, oh my God, what's that? As they're looking in the skies. And maybe if we're unlucky, most of the time, it will come here and decide it's got business. And then we've got to deal with the consequences. I'm not saying the light never does that. It very clearly does. But I mean, the ones we tend to remember, sadly, are the negative interactions. But these are intelligences from elsewhere. The Jinn are in that category, although they belong to this continuum with us. The Muslims are very, very clear about that. And therefore, they would have the same trouble with these other entities, these other intelligences that we've got. I mean, does that explain the so-called battles in the sky that some ufologists have actually witnessed at night between what I notice they claim are sort of contending forces battling for the soul of humanity? There is no battle for the soul of humanity. We're children of God. But there is a battle for the mind of humanity, which is very, very different, and the evolution or devolution of humanity. And that's an idea as old as the idea of original sin. You know, these are not new ideas, they're old ideas in new forms, and they must be taken seriously. I mean, I think I'm on the far distant edge of the ufology community. Though it doesn't mean I'm not positioned there at all, it just means I'm on the far distant edge. And the fact nobody is really asking these questions I find unhelpful, because it's almost like a modernist refusal. I think it's Stephen Greer, what's his name? I mean, he is one of the worst examples. Dr. Greer, you are one of the worst examples. Who, no matter what evidence, look, there's an ET behind me with a gun and it's smoking. Has it committed a crime? No. You know, I mean, how could you deal with someone who's already arrived at the answers before the discussion has got underway, right? I notice he's changing his tune nowadays. Oh, it's not them, it's interdimensional beings. Yeah, maybe some of us were talking about that in the first place. You know, I mean, also, I don't like the sort of space hippies he's talking about. You know, they come down here like cosmic flower children. They have a happening, then they go again. You know, everything's light and beautiful. Not that I'm against light and beautiful. Everything's light and beautiful, and there are group hugs in the UFO. Then it sods off somewhere else to its, you know, galactic hippie nirvana somewhere. Great stuff. But I mean, you know, we're none the wiser afterwards. When certain truths are staring us in the face, like these are questions as old as the human condition itself. Our ancestors used a slightly different terminology, a different vocabulary. They're the same questions. Why can't we revive these questions and say, oh, now hang on, since our ancestors were certainly not stupid. You know, I told you both off air, if you look at the reading age of ancient Athens under Solon compared to modern London, the ancient Greeks do better than us. You know, they weren't fools. They weren't dragging their knuckles along the floor. That's the only myth, and it's a modernist myth I've ever really come across. It's a nonsensical story, an incredible story that bears very little resemblance to the reality. That's myth in the pejorative sense. You know, these were reasoning people, intelligent people who weren't fools, right? They didn't have the technology. Maybe they did with some of the discoveries people are making at the moment, or they had a different type of technology. Maybe they had a psychic technology. Maybe the ancient Egyptians, maybe the powerhouse of their civilization was psychic energy, not a physical energy. You know, so it just depresses me, particularly when we get to concepts like Nephilim. I'll get my lot in quickly, or the Jinn. That we're not reviving these ancient questions and saying that they knew so much about it already, and now we have got technology, which is a blessing. It's not a curse, it's a blessing. Now we can weigh in new ways, we can measure, we can assess, we can analyze, and add another layer of understanding, human understanding, to what is going on, which I can't help feeling certain of these agencies do not want happening. There are certain forces in this cosmos that are going to do, if they haven't already, and I don't think they have yet personally, they are going to do whatever they can to keep us on a primitive, conflictive level, whereby we're all running around in medieval superstition territory, killing each other forever. That suits certain cosmic powers, certain earthly powers very well, thank you, and hold back what must inevitably come next. The Jinn are in the middle, like us. Some of them will go ahead with us, some of them will be behind, and that's what they don't like. Is that an answer at all? Did I say anything worth listening to there?
You always do.
Oh my gosh. Everything, every word of it. With the idea that, and I may have said this at some other episode too, I don't remember, but and I think in last, I think it was last time we talked to you, you mentioned in, forgive me if I'm misquoting you, that religion nowadays is still the way that it was a long time ago, and it's at like a 4th grade educational level. I don't know if that was something you mentioned or if I'm confusing it with somebody else. But with what you just said, with bringing back these ancient questions, like I'm of the mind that there is a lot more to all of this, but the religion that I grew up in, it doesn't even go near scratching the surface. What are your thoughts on the idea of that? Like the church hasn't really progressed or gotten deeper into these things that we know are there.
You are misquoting me. This interview is over. I'm now showing you the pumpkin. Oh, look, I mean, we've all got to be realistic about life. We've all got to be the UFO boys, present company accepted. I am distancing you two from this. can you be more realistic about human life before you get to aliens, please? Yeah, are most people, you know, sort of bound down Einstein's who are misunderstood geniuses and just need freedom to express themselves? Or are they people who want to get drunk at the weekend after an oppressive job, you know, 9 to 5 during the week? It's the latter, isn't it? You know, I've got 5 jobs, I've got 8 jobs, I can't afford to pay my rent. I'm sorry, I'm interested in that, not UFOs. You know, we've got to be realistic about life. If your life isn't what you want it to be entirely, you will not have UFOs and theology at the top of your list of things to do. And shame on the churches. Shame on the churches. Why aren't you helping people? Get your head out your arses and do something useful. I mean, most of these buildings aren't fit for purpose anymore. Close them down, apart from the pretty ones. The pretty ones have to be kept open. I mean, yeah, I've got friends who are Pentecostals. I bet that shocks you both. You know, they're not known for their huge academic basis, and that's not me being snipey. They tend to be very humble, ordinary people dealing with other humble, ordinary people. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's life. It's life. It's life. You know, can we expect everybody to be working on the same level of sophistication? Is that desirable? Do we really want to turn the whole world into a temple? I notice even our good Lord didn't say that. Buddha didn't say that. Krishna didn't say that. Nobody said that. Life is life. You know, if you start dragging things like metempsychosis or reincarnation into it, which I've never ruled out, you know, then everyone's at a different spiritual level anyway for actual reasons. You know, you can't, everyone is, I mean, there's sort of this Western democratized ideal in the first, you know, that haunts all of our cultures, you know, the Western world. Since we all theoretically have a vote, which actually, if you analyze it, we don't. Since you all have a vote, you are all equal mentally, physically, and spiritually. No, you know, I'm sorry, life doesn't work that way. My God, if only it did, there'd be an actual point of departure we could all work from. The trouble is, it doesn't. You know, jocks in high school, to use an Americanism. I was always in the middle. I used to play rugby, so I'm quite physically sturdy. My nickname was the Badger because I'm sort of short and squat and quite powerful. You know, so I was never really a jock and never really a nerd because the nerds didn't like me playing rugby. You know, so oh God, it's a story of my life, caught in the middle all the time. So you know, did I know loads of jocks who'd go around doing boxing and what have you? Yes, I did. All great fun, great guys. Did I know loads of nerds who'd never get out of the library? Yes, I did, and partly I was one of them. Great guys. But they're not the same. They're not the same guys. They're different guys with different outlooks and different ideas and different callings. It's the same with religion. You know, if you're a little church with no resources and you've got a huge congregation or a small congregation and you don't know what to do apart from keep the spirits up, keep their faith up. You know, life isn't just grinding you down. There's more to it than that. Believe me, please. It's not just grinding you down. You know, I think most pastors do a monumental, a titanic job. Sometimes it turns too narrow-minded for my liking. And that's normal. I mean, there are normally reasons even behind that. They're trying to keep people's spirits up and keep them focused. You know, so you don't, you've just come back from working in a pizza joint. It's 4 in the morning and you've got to be up in 4 hours to go to the, you know, your job as a mechanic. So, you know, do you want to talk about celestial intelligences as they were understood in the 1400s? Or do you really want to say, look, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up? It's the latter, isn't it? So I think the church is like every other organizations that are human-based and resource-based. You know, they've got to do what they've got to do as far as they understand it according to their lights. I mean, I think most pastors, as I say, do an incredible job under very increasingly difficult circumstances nowadays. So does your local imam, by the way. So does your local rabbi, because they're dealing with the same problems we're dealing with. you know, all the different types of Judaism, all the different types of Islam, cultural clashes. You know, I mean, in Britain, it's something of a joke that, you know, the local Asian, the local Islamic restaurant, local Islamic supermarket will never close. Thank God. You know, if I want something in the middle of the night, I'm sorry, I want it, you know. And, you know, because they're family run, therefore the family's depressed because they never actually get time off the business. You know, so the imams have the same problems we do, and it's all something to do with keeping people's spirits up and keeping optimism going and keeping people thinking, you know, you're not just the flotsam and jetsam of the universe, there's more to it than that. Certainly, if Mike is having a bit of a snipe at evangelical circles, I mean, I'm tempted to join in. Yeah, I mean, that's not entirely fair from both of us because, I mean, there are people, I mean, Chuck Missler, who was an evangelical preacher of renown, used to talk very, very intelligently and very thought-provokingly about the UFO phenomena. I mean, I wrote to him a couple of times in the past. I mean, that man did work 24/7, so I was lucky to ever get a reply. I've got friends who are evangelical. I bet that shocks you both. Friends who are evangelicals at the moment. Derek and Sharon Gilbert, who work on the Prophecy Channel. They just written another book, The Gates of Evil or something. I know ufology is an interest of theirs, and they would have a different view, I think, to us, but they don't deny the phenomena's there, and that it's ancient, and that sometimes it's evil, and it needs studying. So, yeah, I think you're looking, Mike, at the difference between theological outlooks on a highfalutin level. You know, different denominations have a slightly different attitude to where these anomalous phenomena fit. And also you're looking at, you know, the type of congregation, since Roman Catholics Catholics in the Hebrides tend to be sort of very suave and sophisticated and all drinking their dry sherries after a very, very wonderfully posh matter. Father, that was just so wonderful, darling. You know, all the way down to your working man in Mexico with a local pastor desperately saying, don't kill yourself because life is so awful. You know, you're looking at different churches with different callings and different ways of reacting to life itself. So I think that's going on. Now we've all got to stop beating each other over the head with a stick a bit more and try and understand each other a bit more. And, you know, I think given the time and the resources, those churches would also start including those materials on their agenda. You know, what is going on here and why? Because I think these are genuinely interesting questions across the board. The fact intelligence is from elsewhere and here, are interpenetrating with us historically, culturally, scientifically, artistically. That's the unexplored one. That needs a great deal of discovery. That needs a great, you know, exploration rather. It needs a great deal of exploratory analysis, and it needs all of us pooling our resources to try and work out what is going on. Some of these intelligences, if you follow the ancient mythologies, are so ahead of us, they may not even notice we're here. You know, they're above and beyond, literally in every single way. They're physically. They're gigantic. They work in a different continuum, literally, to us. The laws of physics are different. The laws of mentation are different. They are not us. They are not interested in us. It would be like ants in an ant colony going to a human being and trying to study the human being. Would the human being really be interested? You know, sod off. You know, or us going and looking at an ant colony. Right, and that's mildly interesting, unless you study those things. You know, that right. So, oh, look, they've got a society. Oh, and that right, there's someone in charge, and all right, they're having a Barney, now they're having a battle. Right, dinner, right, it's coming, darling. You know, because the thought worlds and schemes of perception, the schemes of experience are not the same. So, you know, the ancient world would rightly or wrongly have called those beings archangels. They are elsewhere. Do they even notice us? Maybe yes, maybe no. If they do, why? Why are they noticing us? My alarm bells are going off. Why are they noticing us? You know, no. I think let's cut each other some slack, and if you have a local minister who needs a hug, give him a hug, not a stick over the head. That's my story. That's my story there. Sorry, Mike, did I say the wrong thing? Oh, God.
No, not at all.
I think certain people, church groups to extend of it, when they're against UFOs, are just being, I mean, they're contradicting themselves slightly. I mean, what was the star that led the three wise men
Yeah.
to the crib, to the cave, the grotto, the cradle? I mean, I'm not saying it was a UFO, you know, but UFO does simply mean unidentified object in the sky, let's face it. And, you know, these were meant to be magi, in other words, Zoroastrian priests who spent their lives studying the heavens and mapped. I mean, they were the guys that originally mapped the heavens and may have come up with the original constellations. And they, you know, part of their worship was to look at the stars, and they felt that was an anomalous phenomena that needed pursuing. I mean, so you know, look at that in the very core of Christianity. There's an anomalous phenomena that we need to understand. You know, so how can the local pastor bring it up? Hey, Christmas Eve. But as I say, you know, let's all be nice to each other. Let's all be nice to each other.
Yeah, magi is where we get our English word magic or magician. Now, I suspect the so-called back engineering of downed UFOs is an attempt to replicate a counter-rotating Merkaba field through technological means. Chemical element number 80, which is mercury, appears in our chemical literature, as well as anecdotal reports of UFO anti-gravity research. Could this also point to a connection between UAPs and the occult?
Even I can make mistakes. Now, both sit down, and I know that comes as a shock. Even I can make mistakes. For my first degree, I actually majored in Hinduism and Buddhism. I made a choice of studying the atheists. All right, let's see what they're going to say. And I wanted to have a look at what other major world religions were also saying. I went quite deeply into Hinduism, which may seem, I give long-winded answers anyway. Sorry, Stuart. You know,
I like it.
well, I mean, thank you. You know, it may seem circuitous, but I promise there's a reason. I mean, Hinduism is just Catholicism. I mean, oh my God, all those things everywhere, and it's all so pretty, and smells and bells and stained glass. I felt completely at home. And I read very deeply into the Puranas, into the Upanishads, and so on. And remember going around at King's College in London saying, no one ever writes about technology and these things. They're spiritual texts. They're writing about religious ideals and higher consciousness. And of course, about 2 years after saying that loudly, I discovered a Purana that did talk about those things. You know, shut up, David. I mean, certainly I've made some notes. I'd have to look at my diary to remember which one it was. Some of the Puranas do talk about Vimanas as machines. They talk about Mercury and it being magnetized and rotating. Therefore, it's not that those scriptures aren't there. They are there. And it would make it easier for me to wipe all that away. But it's far less fun to pretend it doesn't exist than knowing it exists and wondering what it means. That's much greater and much more fun. So somebody somewhere in the past, and those texts are dated accurately. They're assessed and translated accurately by some very great Indologists. Well, you've got to remember the sort of British thing. There's been a love affair with India for 500 years. You know, I mean, are we terrible racists? Oh, I suspect so. But, you know, I mean, maybe not with India in the way it normally seems to be, because we've just been overawed by everything that comes from India for 500 years. I mean, in the court of Elizabeth I, she would have had Indians because they were exotic. You know, so there's been that passage to India thing going on for a long time. And partly because there was a sense in us that something was going on there that we couldn't really identify. Something is going on there. So there are books authenticated. I don't like the fact we're always relying on the type of material that's questionable, to say the least. I'm not saying people should shut up, and I'm not saying we don't discuss those issues, and I'm not saying those books shouldn't be written. I'm saying if they're going to make a contribution at all, we must admit to ourselves and each other, they are books on a limb. They are documents on a limb. They are not mainstream contributions. And it's only when they're related to the mainstream contribution that all of a sudden maybe greater clarity will form. I think that's the great mistake of Graham Hancock. A man who is desperate to be attacked by the archaeological community. I am right, stop attacking me. You know, I mean, that's an old theatre trick, love, I'm sorry. You know, cuts no ice with me. You've seen actors do it time and time again. Despite the rather cheap theatrics, he's got some interesting points of view. So instead of making it into a battle, and I know some of his opponents do as well, they're just as bad. Let's get our heads together and think, right, is there anything to this? Certainly the Egyptian view, the ancient Egyptian view of life, is not the Western view of how things work and how we get together. They had a technology. I don't think they'd have liked the word technology. And certainly their entire civilization, which makes them unique, was based on magical and occult practices from the high priests who really ran that society. In other words, the experts in ritual ran that society, all the way down to your local, I mean, your local pastor, because they'd have had that too. You know, what does Amenhotep mean at this particular point? You know, so you'd have had all of that trouble too, but it was an incredibly long-lasting and harmonious society that claimed it was those things because its technology was occultism. Another digression before I get back to that. I mean, don't forget these things aren't unknown in the world, the sphere, the whatever, the occultist subgroup, some text. If you look at Madame Blavatsky or Madame Alexandra David Neal, I mean, let's take Alexandra David Neal as the best example. A French scholar who went to Tibet when, if you listen to some people nowadays, you know, women weren't allowed to do a thing and they were beaten to death every day in a kitchen. Well, she's a French explorer in the 1800s with the full blessings of the French Academy. So it's not entirely true, is it? Who documents in an astounding book, Magic and Mystery in Tibet, not only the psychic sciences that the monks were using, but also a UFO phenomena. I mean, Nicholas Roerich talks about UFOs. Madame Blavatsky says cryptic things. I mean, you know, just because she says some difficult things, and just because she says some silly things sometimes. I mean, people tend to say she can't be entirely trusted because she gets things wrong, right? Well, I've spent a lot of time in Central Asia. I've traveled in Central Asia. If you're in, with the deepest respect to my brothers and sisters in Central Asia, if you're in the middle of nowhere and everybody wants to meet you because they've never met someone from your city, from your country, they've never met anyone remotely like you in their life, and they all want to meet you, when you've got to meeting the 15th person with an incomprehensible name that you can't say at all, and you're not even sure what city you're in anymore, I get it muddled when I'm talking to people, let alone her trying to write it down afterwards. You know, should she have had a secretary? Yes, and I should have two stood behind me now. You know, life is life. So it doesn't mean she's an entire fraud. It means she got carried away from time to time, but it doesn't mean she's an entire fraud. She talks about a hierarchy coming from Venus that came to kickstart a retarded Earth. Evolution, the plan. I mean, in theosophical circles, they like talking about the great plan. For some reason, it was juddering here. It wasn't moving at the same pace and speed it should have been. So these superior minds on their world, whatever that's meant to mean, came here and have taken residency here to give us all a kick up the arse and get us going a bit more. So the occult hierarchy actually doesn't originate from here, which is a curious thought. I mean, Rudolf Steiner actually also talks about old moons, old suns, Venus. I mean, they're not talking about the physical planets as we know them. They're talking about, you know, the ancients found a quality or an element that they felt represented a type of existence a type of experience, a type of consciousness that they used with that metaphor. To say that they're talking about Venus on a higher level of, what was it, density, that's what the New Age people talk about, it's fine, fair enough, it's the same idea. But, you know, the hierarchy that came here with us cavemen, you know, they were from somewhere else, and they're still here, according to those circles, because we still need a kick up the arse. And if you look at world events at the moment, I can really believe that. So are there texts that mention ancient occult technology? Yes, there are. Are the thought schemes in place? And remember, I'm talking on this level about recognized and accepted documents. You know, yes, they are in place. I don't like macabres being thrown willy-nilly into a conversation. So, you know, from the great miracle of the Bible, I think, did we touch upon that before? I can't remember. But where if you look at the type of mechanism, if you look at the type of chariot that we're describing, only a god could be in that chariot. Because all of a sudden, what the UFO community, and deep love and respect, I'm blowing kisses, what they've done is devolve that idea into a spaceship that travels through time. Big deal. Is it a macabre? No. Oh, but it's fiery and whatever, you know. It's not amazing. I'm sorry, it's not amazing. It's interesting, but it's not amazing. Whereas if you read that a chariot was made from days and hours, those are the spokes, and the wheels are the circling of the days and the hours. And there's a god whose legs are made of fire and whose top is amber, and every color of the rainbow shone therein. Whoa, 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 whoa. That is amazing, and that's mystical, and that's something on a higher level of consciousness. So when we're talking about macabres in ufology circles, no, we're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about a Doctor Who TARDIS. And it's great and it's fascinating, but there we are, you know. So I think it's unhelpful if we're dragging things down instead of raising them up, because that, if there is a hierarchy, that's exactly what they want us to do. Can we stop running around from one cave to another, shooting each other, and can we raise our consciousness, please? So I don't like the macabre thing. I do like the occult technology thing, and I think there is yeah, I mean, there's a huge level of documentation, all of which is legit, which needs to be assessed properly. Maybe we all need to put on a conference and see what the evidence really is and really isn't, and drag some mainstream specialists into it. Not everybody is against you. You know, when I hear people being attacked, I'm not against Graham Hancock. I mean, he's interesting and he says so many interesting things, but I am against the theatrics. You know, right, who selected the panelists in that conference? They don't just suddenly turn up. I mean, there's an organizer who's invited certain people. Have you invited someone who you know will get up his nose? Does Graham know about that before he turns up? Yes, he does, because you can't just let people turn up and then be attacked at a conference. It's not right. It's not professional. So, you know, does he need a greater hearing? Yes, he does. A dear friend of mine, Anthony Peake, no one's listening to what he's saying, and he's a titan of experimentation. He needs his work, you know, discussed more seriously. But it's life. It's life. Is there occult technology? Yes, and curiously, it gets more complex the further you go back, which shows we've lost access to something. Mm-hmm. If you look at the texts of the medieval alchemists, it is just ignorant to say they were chemists. They were failed chemists before chemistry turned up. It's just ignorant and inaccurate. Some of them didn't even use chemicals. Some of them did, some of them didn't. You know, what they were trying to do was the great work, as they called it, which seems to be something like the recovery of the Edenic state in a human being and the reactivation of that. So you go back to a state of godlike innocence. Some of them saw it that way. Some of them saw it in a more evolutionary, progressive way. You activated in you what came next, your angelic self. I mean, Paracelsus. I mean, he's an intriguing guy. You know, what was the secret of longevity? I mean, he was interested in longevity, but so are the transhumanists. You know, at the end of the day, transhumanism is a discussion about longevity. So why aren't you looking at the alchemists? It was their obsession too. You know, and he created, I mean, Paracelsus was the guy that puts chemicals into medicine. I mean, before him, really, everybody's using herbs. Nobody really thinks about using metals to make people feel better. I mean, silver, before antiseptics turned up, well, your local GP would have, you know, said if you've got an open wound, put silver on it. So we're losing as instead of gaining. Go back to Paracelsus, who would have been interested in cosmic phenomena, cosmic intelligences. The vial in his cane was probably morphine, or probably something to keep up the spirits. That's not to say he didn't achieve a longer life. I don't know. I mean, Falconelli's an interesting example. There were two scholars before the Second Great War. You know, wars aren't romantic. They're disasters. They're moral disasters. They're spiritual disasters. They're not us nobly asserting our rights against the Hun or the whatever. They're just disasters. I'm sorry. There was someone going around Paris, probably Jean-Julien Champagne, saying they'd achieved the great work. So you become immortal, or at least you'll have a lifespan incalculable to us with our Mayfly lives. We will not be able to deal with you in the same way anymore. The idea is you achieve the great work, and that starts the process of transformation. It doesn't mean it's complete. And this guy said, I've done it. You all are talking about it. You all are experimenting with it, but I've done it. And he wrote a book called The Mystery of the Cathedrals. He said the secret of the process could be studied in Notre Dame, that all the glyphs and all the hieroglyphs in Notre Dame. I went there when I was in my 20s. Yes, it was like walking into a Hermetic library. All of it's there. The formula's there. All you've just got to do is read it and understand what it's getting at, and you too can do it. This guy started, it was a pseudonym, Falconelli. He started turning up in universities, correcting people's mathematics on the board in front of his students, and saying, you know, no, you're way behind, you're too primitive. And war breaking out, and the Germans turning up, and I mean, Germans aren't synonymous with Nazis. That's creeping in. I mean, that's nasty. So many Germans had problems under that regime. It was untrue. You know, so anyway, the war comes and goes, thank God. And people start looking for this guy. Now, who was interesting? It was interesting to see who was looking for him. The CIA and the KGB, because they, during the process of the war, what we would call the psychic sciences had started to be employed during that war. But that raises an issue. Were they before that? You know, I mean, the Nazi elite, I mean, my reading of Hitler is actually not the popular one. You're looking at a nasty rationalist, realist, who, you know, will this battle work? How many people will die? Okay, that's acceptable. You know, you're looking at something very cold and nasty. Did he have an interest in the occult? I mean, probably yes. Was it an obsession? Probably no. I mean, his attitude seems to have been, will it work for the Reich? It was the Himmlers of the world that were obsessed with all this. We touched on that before. But, you know, they start bringing in the occult sciences. The evil Rusky starts countering that with the psychic sciences. They don't like, because they're commos, and some of my best friends are commos, right? They don't like theological language. They don't like metaphysical language, but they know those things need to be talked about. They know they're part of human experience. So they try and create a new vocabulary, which nowadays we call parapsychology, because they want a scientific language to deal with those things. So what the communists didn't do, they didn't jettison all these things. They were trying to reframe them. So all that happens in the war. And the KGB, as I say, with the CIA, desperately trying to find out who this guy was and what he'd done, because it looks real. You know, who is this man? Where are all those mathematical formula coming from? Who is he? They don't find him. And there are all sorts of weird stories of him being seen a couple of years later as a woman. Now, we're not talking about transgender, although that is interesting in its own way too, on a psychological level. And then he's seen a couple of years after that as a man again, then after that as a woman. But you've got in alchemy, what they're trying to do is reach the rebis, the divine thing. But that is male and female, like the angels. They are hermaphrodites. The best of both sexualities have somehow risen above themselves into a new being. Mind blowing stuff. And that new being has a different relationship with the continuum to us. So, are we selling ourselves short as communities interested in the anomalous? Sadly, I think yes. And, you know, I mean, I'm a voice crying in the wilderness. I'm sure nobody will listen to what I'm saying. But it just makes me sad that, you know, the Richard Dolans of the world and the Stephen Greers, Greers, I'm still getting that. I've got a block about that one. It just makes me sad since they're on the verge of talking about what I'm talking about. You know, why can't we all just get together and see what we can learn? Does that answer you, Stuart? Shut up, David. Look, I'm showing my pumpkin again. There we go.
Thank you. No, that was amazing. Now, Mike, I'll go off into 20 tangential esoteric questions from here, so you probably better jump in.
No, that's fine. I go for it.
All right. Well, I wanted to mention that I share my birthday with Maria Orsic and the connection to the Nazis that you brought up there. Now, now, what was going on there? What can you tell us about her and what society she was connected to?
Springtime for Hitler and Germany. Dun, 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 dun. One of the best movies ever made, of course, the producers. Oh God, right. Were the Nazis involved in some serious and demonic, no question about it for once,
Oh, yeah.
not people being misunderstood, not people being in difficult circumstances, demonism, the end, right? So for once, we're all on the same hymn sheet. Were they involved in all of that during at the higher echelons? Yes, they were. There were also some people not so high up the ladder who, what's wrong with getting buff and showing your bod to people? I can't do this American prudish thing about never whipping your clothes off. A fee on you all, that's what I say. What's wrong with skinny dipping now and again and all that sort of stuff? Absolutely nothing. Although with my tummy, I probably wouldn't do it nowadays, maybe 20 years ago. Maria Orsic, you old Nazi stew.
Sorry, I'm not.
Oh, come on. Oh, God. I'm in two minds about her, which is why I've got to go carefully in what I say about this.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
Yeah. The Thule Society is not a laughing matter. I mean, Himmler was the high priest of what was going on in SS circles. I think we've got huge amounts of research to do. I do not believe it was merely theosophy. I mean, a friend of mine, the Reverend Jim Wilhelmsen, who wrote a remarkable book, Beyond Science Fiction, where he talks about UFOs left, right, and center, giants, and all the stuff we're into. He thinks the Nazis were just talking about theosophy. I don't think that. I think they're way beyond in a dark way. Theosophy isn't dark, but what they were into was dark. You know, that might be a staging post on the way down, but it's not what he's saying for various reasons. A 30 society were racists in a sense that nobody is, that I'm aware of in public life in the modern world. And that might be me being very cut off and very naive, but I mean, compared to what those boys were saying and doing, no. When you encounter the real thing, it is terrifying and horrific and diabolic, let's face it. The SS elite were looking for origins. They were determined to prove that not only they were the master race, that, I mean, it's nearly a comedy phrase now, isn't it? You know, people throw it around. They meant something terrible by that.
Stuart, did I lose everybody? I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. You both froze up. Okay, it appears that the internet just completely shut down. I'm hardwired in here and there's no internet. That's really strange. All right.
That we got cut off at that
Okay,
when we started that conversation.
yeah, I kept rolling for a little bit. So we're back now. Once again, hardwired in, and so we were talking about the Germans, the Nazis, and I think so now are you talking about the Vril Society?
Well, I mean, it starts with the Vril Society, but very quickly goes into the Thule Society. So what I was going to do was talk about the Thule people, deep, dark, horrible waters, and then get back to the Vril people, because I think Maria Orsic is more in that sort of stream of things. So I don't know if that makes any sense to Stuart.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic for me.
I mean, don't forget, she wouldn't have been one of the occult heavyweights because she was a channeler. A magician uses a medium traditionally to be able to communicate with these energies, with these intelligences. So the ladies, these damn fine-looking young women, who, that's why I can't help being a bit suspicious. Right, you have to get naked and everybody's good-looking. I'm sorry, I mean. And they had these spectacular heads of hair. Now, right, so the showbiz part of me suddenly starts kicking in because I've got a good idea what's going on, at least with some people. So, right, let's look at Vril. Certainly in Victorian times, which is something we've lost in a certain way at the moment, the plasma people are the only people saying it at the minute. There were all sorts of theoretical energies floating around in scientific and occult circles, which had a much greater crossover in those days than they do at the moment, sadly. And that's because of arrogance on both sides. Arrogance always gets in the way. So there were lots of theoretical energies going around. Vril, the Vril power was one of them. I mean, Bovril, I can't stand that drink. Or sort of a Marmite, Vegemite in your part of the woods.
Yeah.
That's meant to have these concoctions that give you a Vril. They give you this oomph. I'm trying to remember what the Jewish word for it is. Chutzpah. That's it. They give you a bit of chutzpah. So there are all these theories going around. Basically, Blavatsky, big-hearted Blavatsky, starts saying, all this stuff is going on. I'd learned of it in the East, and then everyone starts talking about it, and some of it catches on. So it caught on. I mean, she was based in London, I think, at the time, but it caught on more in Germany. I don't think for any particular reason than it did here. And the Vril Society was formed, and they started trying to use runic yoga. I tried that once. My back was out of sync for weeks. I'm sorry, you just can't make all these weird postures unless you've got a very, very strong back. So that you generate this hidden subtle energy inside yourself. It's not Kundalini. The Hindu boys talk about psychosexual energy or chi, but it's linked. It's not prana. It's not those sorts of things, although it's linked. This is some sort of weird amalgam of all of those, or something slightly different. The Vril is the energy that gives you these vast psychic abilities and makes you physically and mentally superior to all the people around you. So you can see where the Nazis are going with it. And the Vril Society in Berlin, actually, it might still be going. I mean, they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything nasty. And I'm not accusing them of doing anything nasty. I mean, they didn't. It was an experimental meditation group. So they were sort of quite well placed, and of course Himmler, being the high priest, wanted to know everything about everything and who was who and what was what. So they certainly came under scrutiny at the very, very least. Some of their members were also. You see, I get, when we start getting into real dark waters, then I sort of get nervy too, Stuart. So you can always tell. I'm waving my collar now.
Yeah.
These are dark waters.
This is the Halloween episode.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, and these are dark waters. There was something called the Thule Society, Himmler was determined, my gag didn't survive, I'll have to make it again, to prove they really were superior to the rest of us. I mean, don't forget, I'd have been in a Labour camp quick as they could get me. So, you know, we're not saying anything admirable. We're just talking about historical processes.
Oh, yes.
Madness and occultism. We're talking about those things. And those two are not synonymous. They link, but they're not synonymous. So Hitler was going around, Himmler was going around, sorry, looking at the ancient cultures and what they were saying, various books, schools, and so on. One of his personal obsessions probably comes from India, actually, more because the Nazis were obsessed with certain types of Hinduism, much more than theosophy. I mean, so, you know, the swastika is actually the symbol of Surya, the sun god. And it can be either way. I mean, the Nazis took advice to try and put it in what they called the angle of destruction. Therefore, the fiery energies of the cosmos would be unleashed again to destroy anything that stood in their way. I mean, terrible, terrible. So they're turning a beautiful symbol of good luck and evolution and fortune and light. They're trying to use that against their enemies. I mean, this is how twisted these people were. Himmler's intrigued in all of that, and he's intrigued in what came before Atlantis. He's one of the guys that thinks human history, and I do mean human, I don't mean master races, you know, human beings go back and back and back and back and back. So he thinks what he's talking about, which of course technically weren't even Germans. The Germans are one of the last remnants, the last vestiges of what these superior beings were. And what you had to do somehow through occult means was ameliorate German blood and get these forces active again. So that's what the SS were fiddling with. Dangerous, dark, dark things. So they said, basically, some of them said that Atlantis was sort of the last outpost of these superior beings. And of course, they started ancient Egyptian civilization, Tibet. They started ancient Chinese civilization and so on. But Himmler thought, hang on. So where did they come from? And you go back to Mu, the motherland. And of course, in theosophical circles, I mean, I find that idea intriguing, but I only have a theosophical understanding of what that would mean. You know, we're titanic astral and etheric energies, so nothing physical. It's too early in human history. I mean, it's arguable that the world had taken full physical shape. You know, these titanic energies were molding physical phenomena into what would one day become the Earth as we know it. And their civilization descends and descends with the great arc of spirit. I think I've talked about that before, until spirit touches matter, and then they feel they've done their work and so on. So Himmler wants a dark view of all that. So, you know, let's get back to that point. What is it? Why did they leave at that point? What is it that they did? And how can we weaponize it? How can we use it? Right? So you're looking at hermaphroditism, which he didn't like. You're looking at all sorts of other genders, which he didn't like. You're looking at all sorts of different types of the human condition, humankind, which he didn't like, because he felt there must be something from those energies. There must be a remnant of them that's here. Like they've departed, or they've gone back to their own lofty realms, you know. But there must be something from the point where spirit touches matter, from where consciousness touches the material world. There must be something left of that point of connection, and you know, it must be, according to their reasoning, something in the form of a creature, maybe, yeah, a knowledge bank of some sort. You know, something they can deal with, something they can twist, unless it's dark in itself. One of the arguments floating around was these things are dark because spirit has touched matter and there's no need to refer to spirit now. I mean, that's anathema to all the mystical schools I've ever dealt with. And also, of course, it's part of a process if you're actually remaining true to the traditions of the esoteric schools. It's part of a process leading back up again to the light. So that he felt there were sort of beings, gigantic beings, hence our interest, our Nephilim Anthropology Conference interest, that were somehow leftovers from what they had been, these titanic colossal energies, these sentient plasma beings, maybe. And they wanted not only the secrets of those beings, which de facto must be ahead of everything else around them, which, by sheer logic must be superior to what anything the earth can produce. They wanted to get back to that and to ask what knowledge they had, which eventually becomes history and occultism and all the rest of it. And they were convinced themselves that these things had an ethnic, a toxic ethnicity to them. And that, as I say, some Germans, to be accurate, were the physical remnants of this descent from the Titanic energies through Mu, the motherland, through Lemuria, which may or may not be a disintegration of Mu, down through Atlantis and down to the Aryan race, which they basically thought was Indian, a sort of, although of course the argument is it's much more Persian. If you look at the evidence, it's actually much more Persian if we're talking about race in any recognizable form anyway. It's so unscientific compared to what people know now, so it's quite difficult putting a finger on that. But certainly more Persian, isn't it? But, in other words, those people that they felt could be marshaled into their ideology to prove that type of German was superior genetically, not simply mentally or spiritually, genetically, to every single other person on the planet. And a great deal of money and a great deal of research went into that. But we get back to Maria and naked blondes. So that became what they called the Thule Society. They didn't like the idea of it not being German. The far north home, isn't that really what we mean by Lemuria? Isn't it before Lemuria, the far north home, and they all spoke German? So they're mythologizing in quite a sinister way. A northern home for northern people, which meant basically them, because, oh, yes, Scandinavian, they're far too friendly, so they can't be part of it. You're looking at very selective thinking in a very dark and sinister way. Certainly some of the Vril Society were also members of the incredibly sinister Thule Society, which I believe is also still going. Why? Because they didn't have the resources of the Thule Society. I mean, a load of German aristocrats were in it, and some very serious occultists, the sort of people you don't bring round to dinner, obsessive maniacs, basically, who want to change the world and the balance between life and death and spirit and matter. They want to change all of those things for their own dark and nefarious reasons. And that's why the Nazis aren't understood by the rationalistic West, because they think it's all about politics, which it was, and all about ideological arguments, which it was. But there's also another element which make the Nazi Party endlessly fascinating and unendingly frightening. Although the reaction, you don't deal with darkness by keeping things in the dark. You drag it into the light where we can talk about it. Oh my God, yeah. I've made Mike explode. You drag it into the light and you examine it and you argue and you discuss and dissipate the nastiness. That's what you do. And that's what these dark forces don't want. They don't want conversations like this to happen. And this is only a conversation, so what else could go on? Maria Orsic, she was meant to be aligning herself during various states of nudity to cosmic intelligences. Maria, darling, could you move in that direction? Yeah. I think these are good-looking girls, and their hair, they said their hair were like antennae and they were picking up cosmic signals. It was something to do with Venus and something to do with Taurus. It was bound to be to do with Venus, right? But something to do with Taurus. And all these old German businessmen are taking notes. Oh, are they? And the Nazi elite are there taking notes, right? They're still scary. And you know, she starts one of these intelligences, Aldebaran, that was it. They start dictating notes for a UFO. This is how you build a UFO, and all these things are written down. And I mean, they say, I mean, who knows? They say she managed to write down a complete design, and then the SS, being what the SS is, just zoomed off and built one. The other weird part of the story is, as Berlin, that beautiful city, why do these things have to come to it? It's being bombarded by the Allies. You know, what other way was there? I'm sure there were other ways, by the way. You know, everything's crashing and the Führer's getting ready to kill himself, maybe. And, you know, basically Germany's in ruins. They've managed to bring this beautiful country with its fine people to ruins. And but Maria's having none of it, her and her girls. So they use their hair for the last time to contact Aldebaran and say, look, we're in a bit of a pickle here. What can you do about it? And the biggest UFO ever to be seen in Germany suddenly is seen over, was it East Berlin? Over East Berlin. And then the girls are never seen again. So, of course, right, you've got the conspiracy theorists. Were they taken to Aldebaran, and are they still there, cocking a snoop at all the rest of us because they got off light? I don't know is the answer. I do know that these girls existed. I do know they were members of various occult groups, all of which were interesting for very different reasons. And certainly mediumship played a part in contacting off-world intelligences. You've got to be careful. In magic, in the occult, you always question the energy, the entity you're dealing with, because there's a tradition. Negative energies are always looking for outlets. And they lie because they want to get their own way. They lie, they mislead. Aren't loads of UFO stories misleading? The aliens lie about who they are and what they are, and they get caught out. And that doesn't stop them. I mean, these are hallmarks of basically what the Inquisition would have talked about, though I'm not defending them at all. Terrible people. You know, what was it? Jacques Vallée? I mean, Agents of Deception, wasn't that his book? You know, when you get NASA people actually looking at the phenomena, they end up saying, but these are things that are paralleled in the Middle Ages. You know, these energies turn up, these entities turn up, they are lying. They can be caught lying. They can be quizzed and then they just deny it and pull back. You know, you're looking at the same thing. So in occultism, you make sure you're dealing with what you think you're dealing with, because these energies, the lower ones, have their own agenda, you know, and they want what they want through you and your group, and they won't stop at much to get it. So does that answer? Nudie German girls, Stuart. Nudie Germans. Does that answer?
It pretty much does. And thank you for going there, because that's a sensitive topic that you handle beautifully. And I absolutely love what you said about bringing the darkness to the light so it dissipates. And I really would like to end this show on that kind of note, about the light of day dissipating the darkness.
I don't like one other thing in the ufology community. It was in, oh God, what was that movie with all the space hippies? Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They're all space hippies. Not against them, as I say, but they're all space hippies. Yeah, I mean, the great religions aren't simply stepping stones to getting off-world. I mean, that's an idea going around in ufology, and it's a good idea. And it was the idea behind that movie, which was a good idea. But there's so much more to these traditions than just that. Yes, they're that, but they're also other things, and they've rich and deep knowledge in their own right. And at the minute we get, excuse me, past technology held up as the be-all and end-all, which doesn't describe us accurately as human beings anyway. We're multiplex, we're complicated creatures. The minute you get past that minor hurdle, you suddenly discover traditions going back thousands of years, and treasures like Vimanas being discussed in ancient Hindu scriptures with levels of accuracy that are mind-blowing. You know, what else are we going to discover? I think we've got to human beings have got to stop silencing sources and listening not only to those sources and each other, and trying to discern what's best in them and what's productive in them. The religions are vast bodies of knowledge, and of course, if the esotericists are right, actually originating off-world themselves. I don't mean in a crass sense. I mean, which president was it? The story's going around that he met all these aliens, and there's this book about
Eisenhower, I think.
Yeah, and they've given us religions which are just indoctrination systems. I mean, I made a joke about it last time. It shows that guy never goes to church. I mean, half the time they're not even doing that. No, and it's just another way of negative energies keeping you away from rich and deep resources. Religions are linking us with the stars. They want us to embrace the light, the mysteries of light. If you look more deeply into the Genesis story, Adam and Eve, what they were designed to do, I chose that word deliberately, was embrace the mysteries of light forever and forever and forever, and go up and up and up and up into these infinities of bliss and harmony. And that didn't happen because they made a wrong decision and they started turning their attention downwards instead of upwards. I mean, that is a curious story. I mean, David Icke, these reptilian boys, I mean, I don't want to write all that off. I don't want to say yes, because he's clearly talking about something demonic. I mean, he doesn't like using that vocabulary because he feels, I think, it drags him into some sort of religious nexus. I mean, I completely disagree, but I can see what he's on about. So, the serpentine thing is still going on in some way, and we're all still outside Eden in some way, and where the majority of human beings are still looking down instead of looking up, but we're designed to look upwards. The esoteric traditions that sort of at least partly become the great religions. It's like an open exam for humanity. Are you really looking at these resources, and are you going to pass the exam, or are you going to become a simple-minded believer? Become a believer. Look at all the benefits it gives you. Without faith, we're nothing. We need faith in each other, faith in the economy, faith in our neighbours, faith in each other. Without faith, we're nothing. But is that the whole question? Is there something more? And if the great esoteric traditions are right, and maybe we've had elder brothers and cousins all the time that were working with us from the beginning, then we're throwing away the very resources that we've been asked to use and dig into and explore. Everything must be dragged into the light, because we're meant to be creatures of the light, and we're asked to go back to the light. I mean, the one thing in the Christian tradition that fascinates me, well, there are many things, right? But one of the few things, one of the greatest things, is that they refer to the original sin. Now, the original sin is intellectual, right? It's not a bit of rumpo, right, underneath an apple tree, that kid stuff, right? The sin is intellectual. The sin is not obeying God. You're clear about what will happen. I mean, I'm in the middle because I have to use a mythic story to make a point, but I don't want to use the mythic story because it sounds childish. But there's no other way people will understand what I'm saying unless I use the mythic story. A situation, right? They're very clear about the laws of the cosmos, and if they don't adhere to the laws of the cosmos as they understand them, something jarring will happen, and something that's not meant to be part of their evolutionary stream will happen. And they decide not to do that for whatever reason. But if you look at the Bible carefully, the moment they've sinned, all of the artillery of redemption starts kicking into place. The minute they sin, we're meant to be immortal, so mortality is introduced. So we can start recycling our cultures, ourselves, maybe reincarnation, our souls, everything that needs to be reborn and renewed. And in Christianity, you say, oh, happy fault. We disobeyed. Oh, happy fault, because now we're going to meet the Creator, the source of the source. Without that, we would never, ever have encountered the creator, his, her, itself. Oh, happy folk, how wonderful this is that we've been naughty kids and now we're going to be great adults. You know, that's why everything needs dragging into the light, and we need to cut some slack for each other, and UFO conferences need to have bigger panels with different types of opinion. The end.
I love it.
Wow.
Extend
Thank
the
you.
panels. Extend the panels. I can see us lot. I mean, I'd never get invited, but I can see us lot genuinely doing that. I mean, Mike's with this MUFON thing. You know, what a great organization. I mean, I don't know about them now, forgive me, but in the early days, it struck me that what they were doing was field study. So they were scholarship. So they were going to places, taking notes, investigating, interviewing, but that's scholarship. You know, you can't say it's good in that field, but not good that mainstream academics are doing it, because that makes no sense. Either it's good in all fields or it's not. And that's why MUFON, I think, has a unique and truly interesting place in the history of ufology. I hate that word. Because it was doing all the things that scholars do and coming up with results. So, you know, that is fascinating. What worries me about these UFO conferences, I noticed MUFON is only one voice amongst many, which to me is quite sad because it's got so much to say, is that, you know, but again, you know, I organize conferences and events myself sometimes. I mean, you've got to be realistic. You know, so if I'm thinking of putting on a conference, right, who's going to be a draw, right? Thinking of locals, who's going to buy a ticket? Are they really going to spend $100? You know, who's going to do that locally? Who's going to be online? Oh, you need someone who's going to be a pain in the arse. That gets the punters in. You know, I mean, you need someone who's so holy no one knows what they're saying, or so academic. Oh, that was wonderful, Professor. You know, you need all that just to sell tickets. But, you know, I think, bearing in mind the gravity of this subject, maybe just every now and again, we need to push all that to one side and get together and think, you know, where are we going with all of this? Because the whole of human evolution is somehow intertwined with these mysteries. So that is where I'll shut up, because there's nothing else I can say outside of a conference context. You know, these are the biggest issues by some of the most interesting people on the planet. There we are.
Indeed. Yeah, just to put it out there, you know, independent podcast is what we are, but MUFON is pretty much what it was in the beginning. It's the whole mission is the scientific investigation of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. Now, with that said, they historically have been nuts and bolts, which is primarily what I do, and we do indeed investigate sightings. We interview witnesses, but they also now recently, last several years, 10 years or so, I think it was, it's created the ERT, the Experiencer Resource Team, for helping people who have actually had face-to-face encounters with non-human entities or potentially boarded craft and whatnot. So they are sort of branching out a bit, but I don't know that the spirituality side, which is why I wanted to explore this independently, because I do believe there is some type of connection. And perhaps over time they might consider that as well. But just to let you know, where the organization is still very similar to what it was when it started in 1969.
Can I just add one? Oh, shut up! I know. Tell me to shut up, you two. You're friends of mine now.
No. I love it.
But there's one last thing I want to add to that. I've never been against the nuts and bolts investigations or the so-called biological alien thing. If you're genuinely dealing with intelligences that are so much more powerful than us and so much cleverer, why couldn't they take the form of so-called machines to mislead? Right. Right. So it manifests for a while as a body, a grey, and then it dies. But is that really what we're dealing with? I mean, for me, the nuts and bolts investigations and the biological alien investigations are really begging questions more than answering them. Do we really know what we think we know about these things? And if we take it even as a wild card in the series, a wild card in the deck, even as a possibility that some of these intelligences are vastly superior to us and maybe don't have our best interests at heart, you know, wouldn't they be more than capable of doing that to mislead and corrupt and grind us down? Because that appears to be what's going on. Always think of the image of the two worlds, right? The light and the dark. And as I say, most of them pass through, and we're not interesting for them, you know, we're just not enough. But every now and again, something comes here, and what is it doing and why? I mean, those would be my first questions. Not, all right, there's a craft not too dissimilar from a human aircraft. I mean, you know, if we're looking at a nuts and bolts type investigation, if we're even looking at plasma vehicles, I've heard of that with some UFO people. I mean, really, it's recognizable. I mean, it's not so far down the line from us. We know what it is. We know what it does. I mean, the very notion of back engineering. So, okay, we've got the capacities to rebuild something that we recognize. If we didn't have that, we couldn't back engineer it. So it's just too convenient. It's just too cozy. It's just too human. It's just what human beings do a couple of centuries from now, right? 1,000 years. It's not so long. You know? So why would that really be the end of the story instead of the beginning? Why, as I said before, you know, why are all these crafts crashing, and why are they so recognizable? You know, why is it that visitors from some other galaxy or the far reaches of our own cosmos, why is it so recognizable to us? That strikes me as not problematic. That strikes me as curiously sulfuric. From the very beginning, there's sulfur. There's the smell of sulfur there somewhere. It's when the Wicked Witch of the West disappears. Was it Dorothy? I can't remember. You know, I can still smell the sulfur. Probably misquoting. And that's not to say all aliens are evil. It's not to say there are no such thing as physical visitors from other worlds. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that just maybe that might be an element in all of this. And the minute that's a possibility, not only do we need to be more on guard, but we need to start asking bigger questions again. Why and who and what are we looking at? Here we are.
Just one more quick follow-up to that. The sulfur, that is a thing. When people see these entities, a lot of times they do report the smell of sulfur or rotten eggs, as it were. But my final comment is I think that they definitely want to be seen and want to be noticed, to your point, you know. Why? I don't know, but...
I'll make one final point. Shut me up, you two. I mean, was it not the Etheric Society? There's a French guy, you two will know who he is. He was a UFO experiencer with your classic saucer-shaped thing. Raëlism, what is it?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I know exactly what you're referring to. It's a
UFO
cult.
It became a cult, you know, a cult, not occult. You know, and he met your classic grey, and it comes down the gangplank. We are your elder brothers. And I mean, but then it starts getting even more bizarre. They want him to dress like a sci-fi guy. You know, why? So he's got to wear this sort of tunic with sort of weird fur lapels on his, you know, on his jacket, so he looks futuristic. But then it starts getting bizarre. Like he has to wear a circulating cross. What, you mean the one that looks like a swastika? What, you mean that one? And then his community, they've had enough of our insults. They decide to pull back from us unwashed, uncouth, and disbelieving people. And they then decide everybody's pansexual. Oh, I don't think I've got the energy. Yeah, everybody's pansexual. I mean, being gay is completely different. Yeah, everybody's pansexual, and you take the oath of apostasy. You don't believe in God, you reject the heavens. Whoa, where's all that come from? And why would an alien want you to do that? Isn't that interesting? So you're back to the witch trials in the Middle Ages. Tell me, mistress, what was its name and what did he tell you to do? Sir, he told me to reject the Trinity. Ooh. Food for thought.
Oh, wow. That's a great place to end it up, I think. Reverend David, thank you so much for your time. It was great as always. Thank you.
I'm just a humble preacher man who is willing to do bar mitzvahs, corporate events. I'm contactable on social media, and I'm cheap at the price. That is a
Thank
joke.
you so much.
That is a joke. That is a joke. That is a joke.
Oh, you better watch out. People are going to contact you. We're putting your website in the link again.
Much love to you, and thank you for joining us for this Halloween special.
Look, I mean, you two have become friends of mine. It's a great honor. This show goes from strength to strength. I can't manage to connect with Stu easily because of the time difference. We'll work on something. Got to connect more with Mike. My love to everyone in MUFON. As I say, they may not realize it. They've got a huge admirer in me. And let's keep the flame alive and the torch burning and see what we can all discover, because potentially it will make all our lives better.
Absolutely.
Amazing place to end. Thank you so much, my friend.
God bless.
All right. Until next time. I'll see you later.
That was amazing.
All right, Reverend Stu. That was quite a Halloween episode, going to some dark places and also getting our connection terminated. That was pretty weird.
That was weird because that occurred at the sort of darkest level of the conversation, if you like. We've got started talking about the Thule Society, which is a very dark topic, and all of a sudden we just got cut off.
Yeah, it was. We've had some challenges before. On one hand, could it be coincidence? Maybe, but I'm hardwired in here. I believe you're hardwired in over there, and I always sort of make sure that everything is. Anyway, there's stuff that I do to make sure that we have a very strong connection, and I've heard from other people actually that have nothing to do with this topic that there are certain words sometimes that if you speak them out, weird stuff happens. I don't know. It was pretty coincidental.
Well, I don't think that's happened exactly that way on any of our shows, so it's quite strange. I'm connected via Ethernet here, as you are, so we're not over Wi-Fi. The connection is often very solid between us, but then it all of a sudden cut out during that part of the show.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. We've had hiccups before, but nothing like that. You guys literally disappeared off of my screen, and my internet was just gone. But nonetheless, Halloween, right? We're talking about some weird stuff. Weird stuff happens. As been said before, when you engage the phenomenon, it engages back with you.
Oh, most certainly. And just for the audience, that lady we were talking about, Maria Orsic, was also born on Halloween, on the 31st of October. That's part of why I wanted to bring her up. She was a beautiful looking woman. Her appearance reminds me a little bit of Sharon Tate. And maybe we can put a picture of her up at some point in the show to show the audience what she looked like. But she's an interesting character.
Yeah, I'll find one and I'll put it up right here during this little section and toss it up. So yeah, that was quite a conversation. We sort of knew what to expect, right? Because we've talked with Reverend David already, but I'm overjoyed with everything there.
I liked his kudos to MUFON, very positive outlook for that organization.
Yes,
and that was fantastic that he mentioned that.
Yeah, it really was. Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, he's just a lovely, informative, engaging person. I always love having him on the show. He's a real friend.
Absolutely is, yes.
Well, thank you, Mike. I want to thank you for this special episode on my birthday. And I know we got into some dark topics, but that's an aspect of Halloween. And I absolutely love where he left it at the end there about focusing on our journey back towards light, bringing these dark topics to the light to be dissipated and for us to work through them collectively. And I think that's kind of one of the themes that's occurring in this whole disclosure movement.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. 100%. So I hope you all enjoyed it out there. Thanks for joining us on this Halloween episode. As always, thank you for your likes, comments, subscribes, and shares. Do keep them coming. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below and about this one or any other show, and we will answer them as best we can.
Thank you, and much love to our viewers, much love to you, Mike. Just continue on this journey with us, and we'll keep exploring these topics.
All right, you too, Reverend Stu, and we'll see y'all back here real soon.